Good morning, everyone. So good to see all of you. I'm going to put my reading glasses on here. So I have to say that, we all have our heroes and the people we look up to, and I am just so in awe of women like Gloria, who not only run for office, but who run for office in some of the toughest states where women can run. And so Gloria has such, I think, a fascinating story and has had quite an experience as a lawmaker. So, Gloria, you are here, obviously, at the convention. So are Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, who are the fellow representatives that they call the Tennessee Three, which we'll hear more about. And you're going to speak tomorrow night at the convention. And so can you just remind everyone about what happened in the spring of 2023?
Sure. Actually, I was sitting in committee on a Monday in our Government Operations Committee, and I got a text from a friend that said there had been a shooting just down the road at the Covenant School. And so it's hard to concentrate on what's happening in committee, but I'm trying to find out what's happening and, is everybody okay, that sort of thing. And then we all find out that we lost 3 students and 3 staff members at Covenant School, just not far from the Capitol. And it was a terrible day. Several of the reps from those areas left and went to go and be with the parents and everything. But as a teacher, I had been at Central High School in Knoxville in 2008, and we had a school shooting and lost one of our special ed students. So, it's this familiar feeling in your gut when something like that happens. It doesn't go away. I mean, to this day, when I'm in a classroom and if I hear an ambulance, I just, instantly just get nervous because remembering the sirens. But as we find out more and find out what's happening, obviously gun violence has always been a big issue for myself and for Rep. Jones and Rep. Pearson. And we had a lot of conversations about that, but thousands of people started showing up at the Capitol every day. I mean, thousands. It was students, it was parents, it was grandparents, not just people from Nashville, but people came from Memphis, other moms who had experienced gun violence and gun violence groups, and they came from Knoxville and all across the state together because they wanted the legislature to talk about gun violence. Multiple times I brought safe storage laws and red flag laws in Tennessee, which they kill them every time. The Republicans vote them down every time. And so as we're going through this, no one is having those public conversations. And on the House floor, they want us to talk about it, and then we were not allowed to discuss it. The supermajority would either not call on us or they were shut down our mics if we mentioned gun violence or if we mentioned the folks outside. And that particular morning, I had gone early. A friend of mine who's a musician in Nashville, Margot Price, I went to meet her to kind of show her the way. She was going to leave some things in my office. And I went to meet her and her mom because they were coming to protest. And she just said, I just dropped the kids off. I hope they're okay when we pick them up from school or when we meet the bus. And just had tears in her eyes at her concern for her kids that go to school very close to Covenant. And I talked to several other mothers that morning, this exact same thing. We're dropping off our kids. We want to be here. We want to be heard. But I hope they're safe when we pick them up in the afternoon or when we meet the bus. And just having these conversations with all of these families, how do you ignore that? And so we stood in the hallway before we went onto the floor and did chants with them. Everybody was singing together. They were chanting together. They broke for lunch and really got to know each other over this week and a half. And there were people with Republicans against gun violence. And it was a multiracial, multi-generational, and multi-partisan group of folks that came together, got to know each other, and really committed to stand with each other on this issue as well as others. And so that day, we normally have welcoming and honoring in the morning. They would not allow us to welcome or honor any of the people that were there and the reasons they were there. And then we said, well, when we're talking about a bill, we'll try to get it in afterwards. Well, as soon as you tried that, they shut the mics. And then they wouldn't call on us at any other time. And we kept talking, what are we going to do? What can we can't let this go by without these parents hearing and these students hearing that we cared about them, we saw them, we heard them, and we were going to fight for their issue. And so we decided to go to the well and do just that.
What I remember about that time is that there were survivors and activists, and in particular Moms Demand Action volunteers, who were not allowed to wear their shirts in the gallery as they watched the lawmakers, but they could have been armed. So you could have a gun.
You can in the committee meetings,
not
on the Capitol
okay.
side, but you can on the legislative side where the committee rooms are, yes, but not on the House floor.
So you can have a gun. You can come into the State House with a gun, but you cannot come into the State House with a Moms Demand Action shirt, which seemed a little bizarre. But also, what I also remember is that they were actually dragging activists, most of them women, moms, even survivors, out of the gallery areas.
Grandmothers over 70 years old, one of the head, or has been head of Moms Demand in the state, literally trying to drag out this grandmother who was just trying to witness what was happening in our state house. And it was remarkable to me. And we can only have like notebook paper 8 by 11 size signs. And so that's all they had, an 8 by 11 sign. They tried to make that against the rules as well, but the courts got that one back. They did everything they could to silence folks, but those crowds kept coming. And then they organized 9,000 people standing arm in arm, locking arms from Vanderbilt Hospital, where they brought the victims, to the Capitol. It was such a powerful moment. And it really, that is what basically forced our supermajority to call a special session or have a special session.
So I want to talk about that, but first I want to talk about what happened to you. So you came within one vote of being punished for what the legislature called your disorderly behavior, just your exercising democracy was disorderly apparently. And then 2 younger black colleagues that we just mentioned were also censured, but you were not, ultimately. And you were very vocal in calling out the racism behind that decision. So, what did that experience tell you about how politics are practiced in Tennessee?
I see a lot of racism. I see it in committee on the House floor. I see it everywhere, and we have to call it out. I mean, if I have learned anything over the last, 6 or so years, you can't let them get away with these racist or bigoted statements without calling it out. You have to call out their lies. You have to call out all of these things that are happening, because right now in Nashville, in the last 2 months, we've had 3 different groups of Nazis marching in our streets. And it is because our legislature and our elected Republicans, including your Marsha Blackburns, their rhetoric about immigrants, about black community, about the LGBTQ community is just hatred and vitriolic. And that is why Nazis feel comfortable coming to Nashville to march in the streets. They recognize the language. It's the exact same language that they are using when they are on the streets of Nashville.
Let's talk about race really quickly, in addition to the punishment that seemed very inequitable. White women. Mm-hmm. We know that white women are the largest voting bloc in this country. Over 40% of voters are white women, but they are not a monolith. They are divided by race. I'm sorry, not race, but by marriage and education levels and religion. And so if we peel off even some of those white women, those swing voters, then we can flip entire elections. In Tennessee, a lot of those white women vote in the lawmakers who have completely eradicated gun laws. And by the way, most gun violence in Tennessee harms black and brown people, right?
Yes.
And so I do think that these school shootings often get white women off of the sidelines, and we start to see an evolution, which is important. But we also, it can't just be like one simple solution to gun violence, just an assault weapons ban. You have to actually become an activist after that. I'm really interested in what you're seeing in Tennessee since Covenant.
So what we're seeing, I can tell you that one of the things to me is like, I know these guys well. I've worked with them for several years, and I can tell when they're kind of like off kilter, and everybody's showing up. Last session, every day in every committee and on the House floor, there were moms there holding their signs about gun violence. They may be not hearing from them in committee all the time, or they try to stop them from being heard in committee, but they are seeing them every day, and it makes a huge difference. And I can't imagine going through that and then having to show up at the Capitol every day. It's basically your new job, because you've got to show up and be there and show them that you will not forget. We will not let them forget. But this coalition has grown so much. In a state where you used to not be able to mention any sort of gun sense legislation, 80% of Tennesseans, urban, rural, and suburban, all parties agree that we can and should pass gun sense legislation. So they call us radical for wanting to pass gun sense legislation. It is the Republican supermajority that are the radicals. They are so far away from the 80% of Tennesseans. I'm talking rural Tennesseans say, we can have a gun to protect our family, we can have guns to hunt, but we can also have safe storage and universal background checks and red flag laws.
That's a huge change.
Yes.
So let's talk about, you mentioned Marsha Blackburn. Let's talk about your matchup against her. I'm so thrilled you're running. Donald Trump has endorsed Marsha Blackburn. That tells you sort of everything you need to know. A lot of people look at the polls. They see it's a tough battle. I know that you feel confident. I feel confident. Can you talk a little bit about your plan to beat Marsha Blackburn? And given what you just said about gun violence, given what we know people feel about abortion bans, talk a little bit about the obstacles, because her policies are very unpopular.
She's one of the biggest receiver of NRA funding. There's no question about that. She votes against any common sense gun law that ever comes out there, and she has. But she also votes against women. She voted against the Violence Against Women Act. She voted against equal pay for equal work. She voted against capping insulin at $35. She voted against negotiating drug prices for seniors. She voted against the child tax credit. I mean, this is a woman who cares nothing about the average Tennessean. And right now, the average Tennessean, 80%, want abortion access, and they want gun sense legislation, and they're just off the page on this completely. And so what's happening in Tennessee appears to be this bright red state, but Tennessee is actually a non-voting state, because we are either 50th or 51st in voter turnout in the country. And so this is what we have to work at, and this is what we're doing, and what our campaign is doing. Marsha Blackburn in 2018 won by 200,000 votes. And the demographics of Tennessee have changed quite a bit since 2018. And in addition to that, we know there are 300,000 Democratic voters who haven't voted the last few cycles. We get those folks out to vote, we win the U.S. Senate race. Not only do we win the U.S. Senate race, but we flip down ballot state House and state Senate seats as well. So we know this can be done. We're getting folks out. People are coming to our campaign from independents and Republicans. And one particular couple we met said, we've been lifelong Republicans. And they came to one of our diner stops. And she said, I'm sorry, my husband really wanted to be here, but he couldn't. And she said that the reason they came over to our campaign and are no longer voting Republican, she said, we watched the entire hearings from start to finish. And she said, she said, my husband's more conservative than I am. And at the end of those hearings, she said, my husband said, I'll never vote for a Tennessee Republican again. And that was because they saw that racism, the way those young men were treated. I was treated rudely. There clearly misogyny is happening in the Tennessee House. But it was clearly racially tinged, the questions and everything that they asked my two colleagues. And they saw it and felt it and were embarrassed and ashamed of Tennessee, and they won't vote Republican again. And she said, and it was very insightful, she said, if we had read an article or, just read it in the paper, I don't know if we would have felt like this. But watching it, we saw everything.
So speaking of race, we are also about to elect the first woman, the first black woman, the first South Asian woman president of the United States of America. Here it comes, Tennessee. So, I want to hear what you think about there's so much momentum. You and I have been here since Sunday. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I don't know how you feel, but I'm also hopeful that this momentum will go down ballot. As you said, it is not just enough to get Harris-Walz the presidency. We also have to give them the Senate and the House and the state houses and the city councils and the school boards and on and on and on. So talk a little bit about momentum. What do you think accounts for it, and what are you seeing and experiencing? I'm really interested in Tennessee, what it feels like.
Tennessee on the ground. I've been doing a 95 county tour. So when I talked to Stacey Abrams before I decided to run, she said, you've got to go everywhere. You've got to go where they don't expect you to go. And so we're talking to people on the ground. I've always been a grassroots person, a grassroots campaigner. Even some of my colleagues will go, what are people on the ground saying, Gloria? But that's what's so amazing. They are showing up. They're concerned. They know when to vote. They're really, really, really paying attention. And it is crossing all lines, race, religion, gender, all of those things. So the excitement is unbelievable. And I was a little worried, honestly, at first with Kamala Harris, but boy, Tennessee has just embraced it. I'm very proud that the Tennessee electors, or the delegates for the convention, we were the very first state to get on the phone, all decide, all delegates going to Kamala. So we were pretty excited that Tennessee was the very first state to be on board and let them know that VP Harris had all of her delegates. And a big part of that is what Kamala Harris did when the vice president, when we got expelled on Thursday. She cleared her entire schedule on Friday, the very next day, to come to Tennessee, to visit with me and my colleagues who had just gone through that expulsion, but also to just touch base with the Covenant families and to just let them know she was there for the community. That meant so much to us that she just dropped it all and came to Tennessee that very next day. It was such a good feeling for Tennesseans. And so those 80% of Tennesseans that care so deeply about gun violence are very much aware of this, and I think we're going to see some different numbers in Tennessee.
Let's talk about gun violence and the new administration. The Biden-Harris administration has been the best on gun violence in history. They have been so incredibly strong. The first bipartisan Safer Communities Act legislation passed in a generation because of Biden-Harris ticket. They have done everything they possibly can through executive order. They have been champions. They've never shied away from talking about their support of gun violence publicly. And we know that they also would prioritize an assault weapons ban, among many other things. Let's talk a little bit about Inauguration Day and what that speech might look like, and then what their actions might look like afterward. Let's picture it is the day of Inauguration Day. Kamala Harris is sworn in as president. What do you specifically want to hear her say that she and Tim Walz will do, and also in particular on gun violence?
Yeah, I'm just excited about their dedication to regular families. I think that so much of the time, our middle-class, hardworking American families and certainly Tennessee families feel left behind in the conversation. Like the folks on the other side very often only want to work for the wealthy and the well-connected and the lobbyists. And so I'm excited about the legislation that's going to benefit regular families. But when it comes to gun violence, they don't even really have to say something because I know that they're dedicated to it. But what, I want to see more with the Office of Gun Violence. We went up to D.C. for several of those things. I know a lot of the Covenant moms have been up and to D.C. as well. And I just appreciate them bringing in all the important players there. And so that I know they've been talking a lot about some of the things that they really talked about was mental health and making sure we're caring for the victims. I think that's so critical. As someone who went through as a teacher when we had a shooting at the school, I feel like we didn't do a good enough job. You tell people, you tell teachers, you tell students, you can see the counselor tomorrow. But I think most people in there, I don't need to do that. I'd rather see something where maybe there was a requirement or maybe there were some activities that just kind of bring people together to let them talk. Because I think that addressing it is so critical. So talking about also mental health, but when it comes to young people, making sure that before they purchase guns, because now in Tennessee, you can purchase at 18 and you can carry anything you want open at age 18. And this is just dangerous. We know about development and young people's brains and all of those things. So it's critical that we address those issues, but really think about the victims and the kids and the community that's present at these shootings and what it means. I just think there's so much we can do. They're encouraging other states and even local communities to develop their own offices of gun violence. And I think it's a great idea, but we've got to make sure that we are keeping guns from dangerous people. That's all we want to do. They constantly accuse me of gun grabbing, which is ridiculous. I own a gun myself, but I certainly believe that we shouldn't have guns in the hands of dangerous people and weapons of war, with regular citizens. Is that something we really need? That's a discussion we have to have.
Thank you so much, Marcia. No, not Marcia. Thank you so much, Gloria. I appreciate you being here. I know you're going to beat Marcia. And for those of you in the audience, you might not live in Tennessee, so you might think that this is a very abstract conversation. It's not. You can help Gloria win. And you can do that by phone banking and even going to Tennessee and knocking doors and telling your friends and family in Tennessee about this election, because right now, Tennessee is being run by extremists. And the only way we stop that is by showing those lawmakers that there are consequences for their behaviors. Everyone in this audience can help Gloria win. So I would encourage you to go to her website and get out the vote in Tennessee, because when we change Tennessee, we change America. Thank you so much, Gloria. I know that you are going to beat Marcia Blackburn. I know that you are going to be a congresswoman in Tennessee. But most of all, I'm so, so grateful for your bravery and heroism for just even running and being in the fight. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate all of your work. And the call for white women for Harris, I was on that call, and I think every time I run into somebody, they were also on that call as well. And that is just a great way to organize, because the women in Tennessee who are on that call are also organizing for campaigns. And so it's just wonderful to see all the activity and all the people who are organizing, because we understand how important this is.
All right, everyone, stay tuned. There are 2 days of conversations for Emerge and the Meteor starting. This is the very first one, and it goes all the way through tomorrow afternoon, so stay around or come back, and you can also watch on YouTube. But thank you for joining, and thank you, Gloria, for joining.